Joining us now is a guest that I think all of our listeners are really going to relate to. He's got a new book. He's a New York Times bestselling author, John Leake. The book is The Crisis Changes, The Playbook Doesn't. The MacGuffin, right? Who profits from this, from keeping America afraid? And how do they do this? And what do we do in response? Joining us now is John Leake. So good to have you on, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, sir. Just to put a finer point, the title of the book is Mind Viruses.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I gave them the subtitle, didn't I?
You gave them that right. Yes. So, but yeah, that's the essence of the book. The threat, the boogeyman. You know, his face is always changing, but the underlying script, it remains the same.
That's right.
And that's what I elucidate in the book.
Yeah, and let me underscore that again. The name of the book is The Mind Virus, or Mind Virus, I should say. And that's really what we're talking about. And you've got an analogy about how they pass this around. Of course, we did see a literal mind virus with the COVID pandemic, didn't we? And I've neglected to say that you are VP of the McCullough Foundation as well.
Yes, sir. I work very closely with Dr. Peter McCullough. He was kind of a dissident doctor here in Dallas, Texas. I'm basically his neighbor here in Dallas. We've written two books together, The Courage to Face COVID-19, and then we wrote a book titled Vaccines, Mythology, Ideology, and Reality. That second book, Vaccines, was a New York Times bestseller last year.
Oh, excellent.
And so the COVID-19 pandemic response and the above all, this extremely aggressive and reckless promotion of this new gene technology shot. It's the kind of epitome of a mind virus, the recklessness, the sort of wild enthusiasm for everybody, including pregnant women.
Yes,
To
isn't
run
that amazing?
out and get injected with this new technology. And then the kind of elevation of Anthony Fauci to something like papal infallibility. He becomes like the Pontifex Maximus of science. That this is kind of the the ultimate example of what I'm elucidating in the book. But it's not only COVID-19. It's climate change. It's gender dysphoria, transgender. It's suddenly, in the era of Barack Obama's administration, we're told that we have this resurgence of systemic racism. Suddenly we're a deeply racist country. For some reason, we had just elected the first African American president. But never, like, just all of this stuff, and it's just one thing after another.
That's right. And of course, in your list, you've got terrorism, and we've seen this going in the excellent trail that you got. You began with FDR and the quote, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." That's not the way our leaders operate anymore, is it? They have nothing to gain if they don't have fear itself. That is the very basis of everything they do, isn't it?
I'm glad that you noticed that we just get this perfect flip. It's like, here's this multi-term president saying the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. But then in the wake of his presidency, all we seem to get is, another boogeyman is coming. Be afraid, be very afraid, but, fear not, because Uncle Sam, is going to come to your rescue. You just have to accept the suspension of your constitutional liberties, and you have to accept that trillions of dollars of federal money are going to be transferred to whoever claims to be in the business of solving the crisis or defeating the enemy or creating a new vaccine or a new DEI program or whatever the solution may be. That's the flip of this. That's the grossly oversimplified solution, and it's an expensive solution. but if we all just go along with that, then we'll be saved. That's what we're told.
Yeah, you always follow the money, don't you? And of course, you can see where that was headed. I was so disappointed because I had more faith in the American people. I know it was naive, but When you look at this, how do they sell this kind of stuff to us? Of course, they've had a lot of experience, haven't they? We're going back to World War I. We had Edward Bernays, and we had a Madison Avenue. They know exactly what they're doing, don't they?
He's a major figure in this. There's a whole chapter on propaganda, the methods of propaganda, and Edward Bernays being kind of a key figure in the development of propaganda. And yes, and propaganda works. It does work.
Yeah.
It's very effective.
Yeah. Something as silly as a green giant sells peas, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, yeah. So, he worked for the propaganda arm of the U.S. government during the First World War. And then he realized, a lot of what we're doing to sell this war against the Germans, we could apply that to selling products on Madison Avenue. I mean, quite literally.
Yeah. Well, the warmongers are literally selling war, so I guess they could sell us anything. If they can sell us a war, that's something we certainly don't need. So they can sell us a lot of things that either we do need or we don't really need that much, but they can certainly know how to sell, can't they? It's psychological.
Correct.
And of course, who profits from this? We know who profits when he sells a can of Jolly Green Giant peas, but who profits from these types of things? And that really is, I think, the key issue. We look at follow the money and who is making the money off of this.
Well, so the adventure there starts with President Eisenhower's farewell address of 1961. He warns the American people of two things. He describes one major problem as what he calls the undue influence of the military-industrial complex. And then the other thing, the undue influence of the scientific technological elite that has been sort of appropriated to work for the U.S. government's military-industrial complex. And he used the term loosely to reference any industry, financial industry, armaments industry. It could be a whole range of anyone who is in any way the computer industry, IBM. It's all of these guys who are contracting with the U.S. Department of Defense to build this ever greater and greater U.S. national security state. And that also already in World War II, but it really took off, I would say, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. That then incorporated biodefense, the pharmaceutical industry, vaccines. All of this is sort of brought under the bigger umbrella of the military-industrial complex. And these guys have a direct line to federal money. So, I talk about this with Russia. Russia was defeated. They threw in the towel at the end of the Cold War. But our national security state, quickly had to reckon with, well, if we don't have the Soviet boogeyman anymore, what are we going to do? I mean, what is our reason for being? How are we going to maintain this budget? And so what you quickly see is, well, let's just keep baiting the Russian bear. I mean, let's keep expanding NATO in violation of James Baker's promise to Mikhail Gorbachev that he wouldn't. Let's just keep scaring the hell out of the Russians. And one of these days they're going to throw a punch back, and it will seemingly then justify our endless bear baiting. And so I think it's important for the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower himself warned about. They always need an enemy. They always need an adversary. Or else they can't justify just the insane resources and power that they have.
And when the Russian enemy as a credible opponent kind of vanished with its own collapse, they had to turn inward. And so now we kicked off with 9/11 and these other things. We've kicked off the surveillance police state, the terrorism panic. And as we see the AI data centers being sold, I'm here in Tennessee. We've got Marsha Blackburn running for governor. She put up a commercial. I've played it many times. It is, every time I see it, I just can't believe how incredibly stupid it is. But she's sitting in a Chinese restaurant, crumbling Chinese fortune cookies and saying, we can't let China get get ahead of us in this thing. So now we got a new boogeyman, China, and we got a new arms race, the AI stuff, and we have to run full speed into this and creating a surveillance police state in order to protect our corporations, don't we?
Well, it's true, and one of the sleight of hand tricks that is made in all of this is, um, look, there are other nations of the world. I mean, the
Yeah,
U.S. isn't the only, and they have their interests. They are our competitors. They want to increase their standard of living, their influence, their share of the pie in the world. It's a competitive world. What this complex in Washington, the sleight of hand trick is to go from a kind of viewing these people as a competitor. We may not always like their methods, but of course, nor do they always like our methods either.
right.
But a competitor, maybe even a peer, and instead of taking steps to manage that relationship, to do the best that we can to increase our own competitiveness, just to do a good job, while also maintaining courteous relations, there's always this temptation to turn these competitors into what the public will perceive as a mortal enemy. And I think that's the flip, where we get into trouble.
I agree.
Um, so I have a chapter on Islamic terrorism, and this is a classic management problem. I mean, anyone who was paying close attention knew that these mujahideen that the CIA had supported in Afghanistan, they then became disgruntled with the United States. We knew about Al Qaeda. We knew about Osama. He was writing essays about his grievances in a London newspaper. All of these guys were known. Three of them, of the hijackers, were on an Al Qaeda watch list. So what the government does is it totally fumbles in terms of managing the problem with just normal management methods. And the disaster then happens, and now the government has this apparent rationale to, instead of just arresting the guys and deporting them. They were on watch lists, they were on expired student visas. Now we have to have a whole new agency, the Department of Homeland Security. The Patriot Act, extended surveillance to American citizens. Wars in the Middle East. I mean, it's
Yeah.
mostly Saudi hijackers, but suddenly we're attacking Iraq. Um, so, so,
It was all a
so,
fake narrative. I don't believe anything about 9/11 from the official story. Not a thing.
well,
I would go with the
just,
name of Osama bin. What was it? Tim something, wasn't it? Do you remember that, Lance? Yeah, he had even an American name, and he would go to the Pentagon and visit with them multiple times. I think the whole thing was a setup. But it's kind of interesting. And when we talk about the military-industrial complex, of course, when we look at COVID, there was a very significant military vector as part of that, both in the development of mRNA technology as well as in the constant rehearsal. I mean, going back to 9/11, it was 2 months before 9/11 that we had Dark Winter, which was exactly what these guys did. And they practiced that with war games for 20 years.
well, it's true. And then I'll go even one step further. So Moderna, the little Cambridge, Massachusetts startup
Hmm.
that ended up becoming one of the two major vaccine players, they started with the Department of Defense, DARPA, Advanced Research Projects, DoD grant.
Hmm.
And I present this in the book. I mean, the fascinating thing about Moderna, it's a little bit technical, but um, when the virus SARS-CoV-2 was characterized and the genome was published, you had a bunch of virologists all over the world that looked very, very closely at the genome, at the genetic sequence. And one of the things that was observed was this 19 nucleotide sequence coding for a part of the spike protein. It's, again, I beg your pardon for getting technical. It's called the furin cleavage site. It's a component of the virus that enables it to lock onto human respiratory tract cells and to infect humans. When virologists looked at this nucleotide sequence, a lot of them thought this doesn't look natural. This doesn't look like the kind of thing that we would expect to come out of nature. It looks like lab scientists have been playing with this thing. So they did what's called a blast search. It's a patent database of genetic sequences. Believe it or not, you can patent a genetic sequence if you've modified it for pharmaceutical research or whatever. So they do a database search for this critical 19 nucleotide sequence, and they get a 100% match for the exact same nucleotide sequence was patented by Moderna in 2016.
Yeah.
Now what
And
I
they've been
just
around for like 10 years and had never had a product that they could actually sell because it never really passed the sniff test, which is, I think, pretty
correct.
significant, but
Correct. So the DoD and HHS were deeply involved in the development of the whole thing. Both the virus with NIAID, NHS grants, with the funding of Moderna, the vaccine maker. NIAID had a 50% interest in the Moderna. So the same group that created the virus also developed the vaccine.
yeah, I always felt
So,
that the vaccine was the bioweapon anyway. But
well, it is.
if you go back and look at it, that was the thing I said from the very beginning. I said, so your body is going to manufacture the vaccine, right? And that was what Trump did. He actually set up this thing in sequence when he had the meeting there, and he had all the different people from the vaccine industry. How long is it going to take you? Oh, that's too long. How about you? And that's a little bit faster. He's got them set up in descending order even. They knew exactly what they were doing. Finally, it gets to these guys and they say, well, we can do it right now because your body's going to manufacture it. I said, oh, okay, let's stop right there. I've been calling it the GCI, the genetic code injection, since that point. And it's like, so
Well,
if you're
that's
going
what
to
it
hack
is.
my body, I'm not interested in that, especially since you haven't even pretended to study the effects on people.
It's true. Well, I mean, you said it as well as I could. The whole thing, from start to finish, starting with the development of the virus itself, and then the vaccine. I mean, it's all coming out now. I mean, Dr. McCullough and I, and obstetricians that we've been working with have been saying for years that this vaccine induces miscarriage, and we've been looking at the evidence and publishing the evidence. Of course, all along the way, we are told, that we don't know what we're talking about. It's perfectly safe. It's perfectly safe for pregnant women. And I don't know if you saw the other day, Senator Ron Johnson from Wisconsin then releases a Fauci text message to then CDC Director Rochelle Walensky in January of 2021, saying, there are some concerns that this may be causing miscarriage.
Yeah.
So, come to find out, they knew about this stuff.
Well, to her, it's probably a
The whole
feature,
thing
not a
is,
bug, right?
right? Yeah, the whole thing, it's the biggest. I'm telling you, if you look at the whole thing, and I present it in the chapter on COVID-19, it's the biggest fraudulent organized crime story
Oh, I
in
agree.
history
I agree.
by by a wide 10x. I mean, it's the biggest.
And when you look at the fear that was pervasive, I joked when people were afraid to touch gasoline pumps, right? Had the masks and everything else. And I said, we've become the OCD nation. Everybody's afraid of everything. We're compulsive in our fear. How do they use that to stop rational people from acting in a rational way?
Well, I have a whole chapter on kind of from the drawing from anthropology and psychology. Like, what exactly is fear? And like defining it, where does it come from? Fear has enormous survival value for people living in an extreme state of insecurity in nature. So, let's roll back the clock 200,000 years. Anthropologists believed that humans were living in small tribes. We didn't have all this technology, advanced weapons, and secure food supplies, and we were very insecure little bands of people. And so the world's a hostile place. So you better be afraid of certain things in the world. I mean, there are saber-toothed tigers, there are hostile tribes, there are crop failures, and you name it.
Hmm.
The problem is that modern politicians, the politicians in our modern era, have discovered that ancient programming, that ancient emotion, it's very easy to invoke that emotion, to excite that emotion. And then when you're really terrified, it disables rational evaluation. I mean,
Hmm.
if somebody ran into your study right now with a knife, you wouldn't have time to evaluate anything. You'd have to you'd either have to flee or fight, or throw your laptop at him, or joust him with your micro. You'd have to instantly react to the clear and present danger. But most of life in the modern world in an industrialized nation doesn't work that way. It's the media making fearful representations.
Yes.
And so, what the book does, it's kind of a guidebook, kind of hacks for recognizing, like, when are we being manipulated? When is our fear being excited or stimulated in order to invoke this overreactive, irrational response for the purposes of manipulation? And that's a theme that you see through with all of these mind viruses. I mean, let's take transgender.
Hmm.
Suddenly, you have tons of doctors, loads of doctors, and pediatric societies and psychiatric, the American Medical Association, members of these organizations literally saying, school board directors literally saying, if your child expresses gender dysphoria and you refuse to address this with some kind of gender affirming care, you're going to have blood on your hands because your child is going to commit suicide.
Yes. Yes.
So this is just a malevolent, inducing maximum fear in the minds of the distressed parents.
Hmm.
With each one of these, you see this kind of fear trick being performed.
And of course, there's the fear of peers, right, as well, and the profession that you're in. The bullying that is happening there, as Dr. McCullough saw, they're going to come after you if you're a dissenter. And so I'm afraid of my peers, and we've got to do what the consensus is. And I said all through this that we never have an advance in science unless people go against the consensus and question it. So science should be about skepticism. It should be about questioning. It should not be about groupthink. It should not be about what the authorities say is true. You should always be able to question that. So talk a little bit about dissenters and how they became the scapegoats and all this stuff.
Well, that's a huge part of the story. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I can see why you were willing to have a conversation with me about this book. Clearly, you thought about a lot of the same things. So,
I've gone through some of the same things, believe me. So,
well,
yeah.
so like dissent. So each one of these things were presented with we are told is some kind of central authority, figure of he already knows everything there is to know. He possesses the sort of final state of our knowledge of this, and from his position on high, Fauci during the pandemic was the ultimate example. I mean,
Yeah.
he's almost like I said, he's almost presented as a sort of supreme leader, or Pontifex Maximus. I mean, like the bridge to God. And
I am science.
I'm science.
And of
Yeah,
course,
I'm
the other thing
science.
that we always hear with these MacGuffins is the science is settled. The science was settled about climate change. It was settled about all the vaccines, the pandemic. Every bit of it was settled.
Yeah, and then I mentioned this in the book. I mean, if you look at the entire history of human inquiry over the last 500 years, every generation has been tempted to think, every generation of eminent university professors
Hmm.
has been tempted to think that, we have sort of arrived at some sort of final understanding or knowledge. And then just 10 years later, a lot of their basic assumptions and representations, to discover are discovered to, well, actually, it's more complex than that. There's another layer to it than that, or there was something you were overlooking, or there's just something that humans didn't know about.
Hmm.
So to come up to the year 2020 and have all of these people saying, well, I mean, it's a paradox if you think about it. They say it's a novel virus. They say it's a new natural phenomenon, but at the same time, they insist we already know everything there is to know about it.
Yeah.
Um, so, who would believe this?
We know that they wrote the novel.
Right.
It's pure
They know
fiction.
the end already.
That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
they knew the end and they practiced the end. It was their novel and their script. So yeah, that
Well,
was exactly what we saw.
but now we come to the important point that you make. So a dissident,
Hmm.
a heterodox thinker, raises his hand and says, "Well, no, wait a minute. Like a lot of what you're saying, I wonder if it's altogether true. Like maybe we ought to look further into this. Maybe we ought to examine alternatives and so forth." You know that a mind virus is being propagated when the dissident is immediately told to shut up, like
Yes,
immediately censored. Like,
that's
we're
right.
not even going to talk to you about this. We're just going to take you out behind the woodshed. So, and that touches on if it's a ranking academic medical doctor like Peter McCullough,
Hmm.
the viciousness of the attack, that is a form of deterrence, intimidation. Like, let's take this guy out in a very, very public way
Yes,
and just massacre this guy. Like, fire him from his job, sue him, take his board certifications, strip him of his professorship, like annihilate this guy.
yes,
Now, why the retribution? Well, it's to deter other doctors of his academic station from thinking that, well, maybe I ought to question this. It's classic intimidation technique of tyrants.
yes.
And I want to emphasize this. The book, I go a lot into our founding fathers. I frequently reference our founding fathers, particularly Madison.
Hmm.
And I mean, they warned us about this.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's like a republic if you can keep it. If as Ben Franklin put it, like it's not going to be easy to keep your republic because
That's right.
tyrants, ambitious men who seek power and glory are always going to want to take it away. And this medical stuff is the discovery that, we can invoke central medical authority and everyone out of fear will comply, conform, obey.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah, that was the thing about the founders. They really did understand human nature. And we're talking about politics. You've got to understand what human nature is. And they were also honest with us about it, too. They identified with the people rather than with the elite. They did not seek to set themselves up as elites. That truly was a remarkable period, a remarkable group of people. And we should still be able to learn from that, I think. Yeah.
I take a pretty nice walk down memory lane with our founders and their vision. I mean, it's not a coincidence that young people aren't taught civics anymore.
That's right.
It would seem that the powers that be, the last thing they want are young people that really understand these concepts of limited government.
Hmm. Hmm. And so, as you point out in your book, we have now a permanent state of crisis. And certainly we can see that with the current president. I mean, we've never had, and I remember this being kicked off when Obama was president. Everybody talking about, look at the number of executive orders he's doing. Then we had Biden went to a tremendous number. Now we've got Trump doing more than they did. And so this is just accelerating, isn't it? And really, the executive orders are always predicated by a supposed emergency. Everything's
An
an emergency.
emergency. The other thing, so you mentioned executive orders. One of the things that I highlight in the book is this explosion of debt, that
Hmm.
this throwing caution to the wind in terms of fiscal discipline. And
Oh, but that's not an emergency, is it, John?
Well, we're told that's not an
That's
emergency,
right.
but what is the rationale for creating 2 trillion here, 1.5 trillion there,
That's right.
another 100 bill here? There's always some crisis, some threat, some emergency that we're told is justifies or it provides a rationale for the U.S. Do you remember how much money Congress created by statute, created out of thin air with the CARES Act of March 2020? That was
Oh
the
yeah.
pandemic response.
Yeah.
$2.2 trillion made with a keystroke, and that money was just sloshed all over the place. If you had a little PCR testing lab, if you were a vaccine manufacturer, personal protective gear, anybody that was even remotely associated with this business of pandemic response made a fortune. And it's all under the cover of it's an emergency. So what do we learn? It's like an emergency is a good thing. Get close to the federal government and hope and pray or create an emergency.
That's right. I remember in August of 2020, I saw a complaint from the American Hospital Association, and their initials are AHA, and I said, "Yeah, this truly is an aha moment," because they were complaining. They said, "You want to take away our 20% bonus? You told us at the beginning of this that you didn't have the test and that it didn't work anyway. Now you told us that if we had a COVID patient, we could just do a clinical diagnosis and we get 20% bonus on everything that we do with them." They said, now you want to take that away? And so it's like, okay, bingo. It's all about the money, isn't it? Right there.
Yeah, that gravy train came in hot, and a lot of young hospital executives, notably, retired shortly after the pandemic, even though a lot of these guys were still in their 50s.
Yeah.
Did so well
It paid
with
really well.
yeah, yeah,
Federal government
yeah.
does pay well for emergencies, doesn't it?
Right. I have a chapter on the financial crisis of 2007 and 8, and the pernicious lesson there was, so you got these Wall Street bankers who engage in all this reckless behavior with derivatives and mortgage-backed securities and fraudulent bond ratings, and
Mm-hmm.
accumulate an enormous amount of risk in the financial system. And then the mortgage bond market just totally blows up, and the whole thing seems to be going down the tubes. Uncle Sam, first Treasury, and then the Federal Reserve come in with trillions of dollars, and they bail out the financial industry. So what is the lesson? It's like oh, and then Eric Holder, Obama's attorney general, he doesn't prosecute a single Wall Street executive,
Yeah.
despite an abundance of evidence, including email evidence. So, like, what's the lesson? It's like we get away with murder,
Mm-hmm.
and we are richly rewarded for committing it.
That's right.
That's the
They're
lesson.
too big to fail. And as Matt Tiabi pointed out in Rolling Stone, he said, yeah, they're too big to jail as well. That's the
That's
bottom
it.
line.
So I thought of Matt when I was writing that chapter.
Yeah. So, how do we recognize? You talked on a number of ways that we can recognize how we're being manipulated ideologically, and how do we protect our minds from the emergency? Because when we're talking about the financial emergency, I'm thinking about this and how most of these emergencies are manufactured by them, or it's a novel by them that they've written. They've written the plan in advance, but they actually, by the amount of money that they've been throwing at all these various emergencies, we've got a real emergency that is building up that's actually someday going to hit the fan. And that is this massive debt. And when that real emergency happens, boy, you better be careful what they're going to do when they got a real
I know
emergency.
it's so interesting that you say that. It's like this debt thing. I was just reviewing my finances. It's like this could be the real deal. Like this
Mm-hmm.
isn't this isn't some kind of contrived thing, that we're just kind of given this magic misdirection trade. Like this could be the real deal. The other thing is just this continuous baiting of Russia.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just begging Russia to hit back, really, really hard. Now that'll probably hit Western Europe first, but I was just attending a conference in Berlin at the German Parliament, the German Bundestag, and like these guys are just nuts. I mean, they're just baiting the Russian bear so hard. And do they not remember what happened
Yeah.
between 1941 and 45? I mean, Germany was destroyed.
Yeah.
I mean, the Red Army occupied Berlin. So, it by the behavior of the U.S. government, you do have to distinguish between these kind of contrived, nonsensical boogeymen and the real risk of disaster that is emanating from our government.
Yes.
It's our so a broader theme of the book is that humans need to be governed. We can act very crazy and chaotic. We have to have a rule of law. We have to have courts that adjudicate crimes and so forth. But the problem is that the state itself consists of men, of humans,
Hmm.
so that the state itself needs to be regulated. The state itself needs to be governed. And I think that's what a lot of people have lost sight of. I mean, I would even go so far as to say that a lot of people who are now occupying positions of power and decision making in this country are themselves a case for criminal psychiatrists. And I'm not exaggerating
Oh, I
that.
agree. Absolutely, I agree. Yeah, what you're talking about there, of course, is Madison said, well, because men are not angels, we need to have government, but because government is by men, what do we do about this? So they came up with a system of checks and balances. But of course, these clever demons who have worked their way into where there's the most power and money, they have figured out a way basically to short circuit every one of those checks and balances. We don't really have a government that functions like that anymore.
It's true. So it shows that the framers were not able to create a completely watertight
Hmm.
system.
Hmm.
Well, that's just the way it is, isn't it? Human
Yeah.
ingenuity can always get around things, can always come up with a workaround. But I mean, what I argue in the book is that if we, the people, if something like the middle class is educated, is reasonable, is discerning, maybe we could start pushing back against this.
I agree. And I think they're worried about that. I think that's why you see so much of a push towards shutting down free speech on social media, towards making sure they've got an ID for every person that's on the internet. They want to make sure they control that speech. They know who is saying what, so they can have repercussions against those people, just like we've seen against Dr. McCullough throughout all this. I think
It,
that's
it
really what they're up to.
it's true, and people that don't have particularly strong credentials or influence, I think there's a certain amount of allowing those guys to say what they want. It's the guy that kind of stands up in the public forum and knows what he's talking about. I mean, actually sees where all of this is headed and is able to, really start developing some kind of influence in the forum. I mean, it's those guys that are at the greatest risk, I
Hmm.
think.
Hmm.
I mean, you notice it's like, don't get too big for your britches, or else it kind of turns into this Game of Thrones thing where you might just get taken out.
Yeah, I have we had some friends who are from Japan, and they said they had an expression there because everybody in that country is very conformist, right? They're not going to buck the system. And they said they had a saying that the nail that sticks up gets hammered down. And that's
That's
really what you're talking about here.
Yeah. That said, I mean, when Peter McCullough he gave some Senate testimony on the invitation of Ron Johnson, and he's really started to develop a voice in the public forum. And then in 2001, I mean, it was just full war on Dr. McCullough. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
all of his social media accounts were just taken offline. I made my first interview with Dr. McCullough. It was beautifully shot in studio. It was actually quite an undertaking. Put it on my YouTube channel my author YouTube channel, it was taken down 2 hours later. And that's when we realized, wow, like censorship, First Amendment abridgment, it's on. I
Oh
mean, we
yeah,
are seeing the suspension of the First Amendment. So this is just classic tyranny.
that's right.
But I mean, it doesn't have to. I mean, we did see certain brave, discerning people that push back against this.
That's right.
But the battle's never won. I ultimately have a spiritual dimension in this book. I mean, eventually you get around to asking, like,
Hmm.
there's something to the old idea of the eternal battle between good and evil, because it kind of seems like we're in it right now.
That's exactly what it is. And we're not going to win this unless we got people of character. I mean, that's what's happened is that we have lost our foundational understanding. I mean, people talk about America being a Christian nation. Well, it doesn't mean that all of the leaders, the founders or whatever were Christians in the way that you might define it. But they did have a Christian understanding of the equality of man before God and our inherent rights and that type of thing. Those types of issues were also the very thing that made somebody like George Washington value his character and his integrity. Where is that person today in the public sphere in terms of politics? I can't think of a single person that you could hold a candle to George Washington in terms of character or integrity. They don't even value it anymore. And we don't value that as a society. And so I think we do need to have a spiritual revival in the sense that we need to at least value and understand what is good and true and right. We just don't care about truth anymore. And I think that's a key thing with the censorship.
It's true. I mean, I oftentimes think, so you talk about Christian civilization, one way in which I think Christianity, and then just Western culture, even the inheritance of the classical world, where it was manifest in the late 18th century with guys like Washington and Madison, was something along the idea of a gentleman with
Hmm.
morals and manners. I mean,
That's
in other
right.
words, he's not necessarily overtly, reading passages from the Bible to underpin his public
Hmm.
um, person, but a kind of tell the truth, possess the old virtues, behave, with modesty and restraint in your dealings with men and women. I just don't see any of that in the public forum. It's this avid, self-asserting, vulgar,
Yeah.
loud, and what we seem to value is status and wealth. Now, status and wealth have always been valued in human society, but yeah, I think the difference now is it's status and wealth that is not in any way circumscribed by things like manners, class, taste,
That's right.
honesty,
It is the be
integrity.
all and end all, and it's the only thing that people seek is the end of it. And they don't, as you point out, it's not contained as it needs to be contained with some of these other issues of integrity and character and manners and that type of thing. To have a civil society, we can't have a civilization if we don't have civil leaders. We can't have a civilization if we don't have people of character. I think that's exactly right. And when we talk about it, you're right. It isn't about going out there and reading Bible verses to somebody. That's not the job of government. But the job of governing does require character and morality and integrity, and that's what we don't have. So it's a difficult thing that we're in right now. And the question is, I guess, where do we find men like this?
I realize I need to plug in my computer. I thought I had more juice on it. Excuse me.
That's
Um,
fine. That's fine.
so
But
you, so I mean, I would say that you and I, although we've never talked before, and although you've only just now gotten into my book, I mean, I'm always encouraged when I meet someone who is viewing the world in much the same way. In other words, I don't think what we're seeing is just some idiosyncratic quirk or something. This is real what we're observing, The problem that I see in Washington, I mean, there are a couple of gentlemen in Washington. There are a few of them, but it's just, I think Ron Johnson, Rand Paul, I think Thomas Massey is a great man, but it's hard to be those guys.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's you climb into the ring up there in the Beltway, and you're kind of swimming around with sharks and monsters. And I think most normal people, they don't want to be subjected to that environment.
Yeah, I
So
wouldn't
there's
want to be subjected to it. Absolutely. Yeah, it's the key thing I think that you hit on when you said here. This is the first time we've talked, and there's this common understanding. And to me, that was one of the things about the pandemic that they tried to manage so much to create fear. If you see that, if you saw the issues and the contradictions, they wanted to make sure that you didn't see that somebody else saw it. They wanted to make sure that you didn't connect with other people who saw the same things. They wanted you to think that you were the only one who was thinking this. So maybe you must be wrong or a conspiracy theorist or paranoid or whatever. They want to isolate people so we don't realize that we share this common value. I think that's the key thing.
yeah, this atomization where people can't get together and compare notes.
Hmm.
For sure. Ultimately, we come to the final chapter of my book, and the title is "The Devil and the Great Undoing." Like, what? The question is this complex, and I'm not exactly sure what it is and who's in it, and it could well be that you have different members of the complex who aren't fully aware of what exactly they're participating in. There's a kind of interior logic that you don't necessarily fully understand yourself, but you quickly discover, well, if I'm going to be a part of this club, there's certain things that I have to accept, there's certain things that I can't question. So you have this kind of complex that's running things. The ultimate question is, what do these people want? I
Hmm.
mean, a lot of these guys are already, multi-billionaires, so it's not just money.
Yeah.
Is it power? I mean, power, money, but like what else? It ultimately, the book concludes with inviting the reader to kind of get back into the realm of metaphysics. Like, are we up against um, some kind of uh, manifestation of what man has perceived over the millennia to be evil?
Yeah, I believe
Uh,
we are. Yeah, I would say yes, definitely. And I think they keep manifesting the fact that they want to get rid of the population and various other things. They truly do hate humanity.
I think so. There is a sort of revulsion and contempt
Mhm.
um, in ordinary humanity.
That's right.
Of course, the other mysterious thing is that a lot of the men that run the world are quite old. They're not going to be around much longer. So there's a kind of a King Lear element. There's sort of a vanity of I want things my way, and a kind of deference and recognition of my power. Um, Even though a lot of these guys are they're at the end of their lives. So, I
Yeah, I
do.
agree. Yeah, and how many lifetimes would it take them to go through the fortune they've already accumulated? There actually is got to be something that's there. And the thing is, John, for the longest time, we all have this sense that yes, intellectually, I know that I'm going to die. Right? You can't imagine it. You don't really think that it is imminent necessarily, unless maybe you are on a in hospice or something like that. But most people don't really come to really understanding that. They may have an intellectual assent to it, but they don't really own that. And now you've got a lot of these people who think that they're going to be able to live forever. They're going to get some kind of life extension technology. I mean, they've talked about that. We're going to
It's
live forever and transfer ourselves somehow to some machines or something.
it's true. Are just the thought that there's time yet for me to really leave my stamp on the world. There's time
Hmm.
yet for me to sort of witness or behold my power and my influence. I mean, I think a lot of this, to take it into a more elemental psychology, I think a lot of this this Epstein drama that we were given glimpses of it, and then quite suddenly, it's like, okay, we're not going to talk anymore about this. And in fact, not only are we not going to talk anymore about the Epstein disclosures, we're going to get rid of Thomas Massey and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and we're going to start a war in Iran to change the subject altogether.
Yeah.
But what were the glimpses that we were getting in these Epstein revelations? And it's old men who are so arrogant in their perception that no one will ever know what I mean, just you saw the former president of Harvard exchanging talk of seducing students and so forth on the Harvard EDU server.
Mm-hmm.
And you think this is Larry Summers, and you think, well, so you guys really do think you're just absolutely untouchable, that you just do whatever you want, that
Right.
no institution, no matter how venerable it is, you just do exactly what you want. And this interest in seducing much younger women, I think that is a kind of archaic expression of my power, my vanity, my ability to get exactly what I want, and even young nubile women will do my bidding.
Mm-hmm.
A kind of satanic pride.
Yeah. Because the fear of God is not in them. We've been talking about the fear, how they try to engender fear in everybody else, but they have no fear, including fear of God, fear of being
Well,
caught.
they appear to be afraid of death.
Yeah,
They
to some
do appear to
degree.
be
Yeah.
afraid of death.
But it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting. We look at these aged politicians. We've had so many of them who have, died in office. We had Dianne Feinstein. We've got Mitch McConnell now, who apparently, well, we won't go into what his situation is right now. But nevertheless, you got people who do not want to get out. They talked about that with Darth Vader Ginsburg, as I call her. And she did not want to leave. And so they got very upset. You should have left while we had a Democrat who could replace you. But they really take their meaning. Hillary Clinton talked about the politics of meaning, and I really always thought that what she meant by that was that politics gives meaning to her life. This is their entire life, and whatever they're looking at, whether it's their immediate power and wealth or whatever, or the way they're going to be remembered, it is the thing that really they thrive off of. They just love doing that thing, whatever it is, and exercising that power over people. And they won't leave even as they are incapacitated, no longer mentally able to do the job. And we've seen that with all three of them.
Well, that is perhaps an opportune moment to conclude our conversation,
Mm-hmm.
because I have to get on another interview at the top of the hour or the beginning of the new one. The cover of my book, my mom said, I think the cover of your book is very disturbing. I wish you would choose a different one. It's an allusion to a painting by the great Spanish painter Goya. It's the painting is Saturn devouring his son.
Mm.
So, Goya was very disturbed by the Napoleonic invasion of Spain. I think it was in 1808. And all this war and destruction and firing squads and soldiers raping Spanish peasant women. And like, what is all of this about? Like, well, why are the government, why is Napoleon doing this? And he had this idea of Saturn, the Titan, devouring his children because he didn't want to relinquish power.
Mm.
He Saturn in the myth, he wanted to maintain the Titan rule of the universe. And so he devoured his children. And I think these old people whose all of the meaning of their lives resides in power. It's like what you said of Hillary Clinton, and I refer to her multiple times in the book. It's like Saturn devouring his children.
Yes.
I mean, these people will Make no mistake, they will sacrifice hundreds of thousands of young men if it comes to some nasty war with. If we get into World War III, and I'm concerned that we're headed that way, these
Yes.
people will sacrifice hundreds of thousands of young people.
Oh,
It's like
absolutely.
Saturn devouring his children. So,
I
sir, I've
agree.
enjoyed this. I've enjoyed the interview, and I'm sad that I have to go. I really like the
Oh,
conversation.
really enjoyed talking to you. And again, the book is Mind Viruses, America's Irrational Obsessions by John Leake. Thank you so much, John. I appreciate you coming on, and it's great talking to you.
Thank you, sir. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.